I'm here with Howard Lukk, Walt Disney Studios. Howard, how are you?
Good,
Excellent.
thank you.
Okay, Howard, so I want to talk a little bit about distribution, and specifically the Interoperable Master format, which SMPTE is currently working on. So I understand there's some challenges. I mean, obviously Disney produces a lot of content, you know, different languages, different subtitles. I mean, what's the problem here with distributing all that content?
Well, as you know, we are a global company, and so we're distributing our films throughout the world. And in order to do that, we like to customize as much as we can the distributions for each unique part of the world that we're able to do that for. So we can, from certain times, go up to 62 different languages just for one film that we distribute. If you combine that language differences with the fact that we do different standards of formats, so standard definition, high definition, for an example, along with different aspect ratios, which is the size of the image that hits the screen. We have a 4:3 size for some older legacy TVs. We have 16:9 for the newer TVs, and then we have theatrical releases as well, which have a 1:8:5 aspect ratio or 2:3:9. So when you combine all these different variables together, we've calculated on some shows that we have up to 30,000 different versions that we distribute. So this makes for a very complicated system of distribution. So we are looking at, and have been looking at, ways to simplify this process and make it a little bit less intensive on our storage and our distribution systems. And along the line, we came up after we did a lot of the digital cinema standardization. We realized there was a lot of benefits that came from that we could implement into our distribution servicing architecture. And that's where IMF was really born.
So the digital cinema work was basically where it got its birth, right?
Exactly. It was a forerunner to the IMF. And you know, in the standards process here at SMPTE, we borrowed a lot of the stuff that was done in the SMPTE standardization of digital cinema for IMF. So things like the composition playlist came directly from digital cinema. The things such as track files that we use are, again, things that we discovered and came up with in digital cinema. So we've done a lot of repurposing of the digital cinema architecture for the IMF.
So going back to distribution, how does IMF help this problem that you guys have with all these different formats?
Yeah, what IMF does for us now, it's the same thing, again, like I said, we did with theatrical, is we make two master versions of a film, for example. So as Cinderella goes out into the world, we have a domestic original version, we call it, and we have an international original version. And these are put together in such a way that we can slot in different languages. Domestic meaning domestic United States, basically. So we certainly supply Spanish, Latin American Spanish to the domestic US releases. We have French because of, it's not just US, but Canada as well. So we survive for some of the Canadian areas that speak French. And we have the jokes and all of the things that are relevant in the content for the story points to be pointed towards, you know, the Americas, if you will, for that. When we go to international, we have a much wider range of languages and cultures that we try to adopt our films for. So we make an international version that's set up a lot better for slotting in different background story points. For example, if we had a poster in Tangled, for example, that was in English and it has to do with the story, we put that into French and Italian and German and Spanish and any other country they go to, so that people get the same concept from the story.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Now, there's some standards work going on now within the SMPTE. How's that work going right now?
The work's going very, very well. It's probably been one of the less complicated standards efforts we've done in a long time. Certainly for digital cinema, it was very new conceptually to a lot of people, so it took a lot of processes and procedures to get through those standards. But with the IMF, it's familiar to a lot of people already, so the standards effort's gone quite well and quite fast. We've got 2 documents that are now published. The composition playlist along with the essence track file that's been published as a SMPTE standard. We've got 4 more documents ready to be published at any moment. They're waiting for some other documents, normative references, to be completed, and then those will also move out in the field. And we've got a couple more documents still coming up through the committees to be balloted and move forward. The output profile list is the one that comes to mind in that area.
So obviously Disney has an interest in this, and there are other documents that are going to be published later on that's going to fill the entire suite of documents. So do you see any other problems with adoption, or how is the adoption rate going now with other studios, not in Disney in particular?
Yeah, so the world needs to kind of catch on to IMF. We've certainly been socializing it as much as we can. A lot of manufacturers and also companies don't really want to put things into IMF until they have standards that are settled and done and published, right? And it's certainly something that I don't blame folks for waiting for published standards. Some other manufacturers that want to get ahead of the game actually go ahead and commit to hardware and software without having a published standard, being very close to the SMPTE standards. The problem that they may face is things may change a little bit before it gets published. So there's different types of proactivity among the different manufacturers. So we're certainly talking to all of the manufacturers and vendors that we deal, promoting IMF as this is what Disney wants to do going forward. And we're trying to get all of our downstream distribution folks also educated on IMF so that they can receive IMF packages as well too. So that would be our goal, is in the end, is to be able to send out IMF packages to most all of our distribution avenues. Remember, this is a business-to-business type of a standard. It's not really designed to go all the way out to the consumer. It could, for example, be moved into that arena, but for right now, we just look at it as a business-to-business type of a standard.
Well, speaking of the business, is this something that broadcasters can take advantage of, or is this basically a content production type thing?
No, this really is sandwiched between content production and distribution servicing. And broadcasters certainly could take advantage of this, especially in countries where they have multiple languages to service. For example, we could send a package to Europe, Middle East, and Africa that contain all of the languages along with the title inserts and everything, and we can actually conserve the storage and the bandwidth by sending a package which jumps from an English title and inserts an Italian title or inserts a German title. Therefore, we don't have to send the whole thing as a flattened file for every version that we have. Yeah. We can send supplements for that original international version that the IMF can point in and out of for the distribution servicing of those things. So we think it's a great advantage. It takes less storage and less bandwidth to move these IMF packages around, other than what we're doing now by giving complete flattened files, if you will, to each distribution we do.
Yeah, well, let's talk about distribution for a second, because I was talking with a colleague about this morning, and in general, it used to be a real pain. I mean, we used to have to ship big reels to theaters and stuff, and when we moved on to digital cinema, we started shipping hard drives. Where do you see distribution to the cinema moving in the future? Is it going to be a satellite distribution, maybe a fiber? Where do you see that evolving?
So we certainly started off with the hard drives because that was the easiest thing that we could do, and actually the theater community understood that. It was like receiving a film reel. It was something physical that actually showed up on the door. Right. Also, theater infrastructures were not, at the time that we started digital cinema, really up to snuff with their infrastructure and their network infrastructure and bandwidth out to the outside world.
The last mile problem.
The last mile problem, exactly. There's been a lot of now installations of satellite receivers for theaters. So satellite distribution is the next wave we're going into. This allows us to do a broadcast out via satellite to multiple theaters simultaneously at the same time, where they have a catcher server on the other side that catches the content as it comes in. Ultimately, though, we think that a networked infrastructure of fiber, when the bandwidth is high enough via the web or any other device, because this is all protected content, it's wrapped up, it's secure, it can go over just standard networks, if you will. That's where we'll end up at some point in time. But we have to wait for the infrastructure, again, the last mile problem, and the first mile problem in some cases, to be kind of fixed before we can really go to that robust system to send it out through the network. But ultimately, that's where it's going to go.
Right. All great stuff. Well, thanks, Howard. Thanks for joining us. And you can get more information on the standards, in specific the Interoperable Master format, on standards.simpty.org. Thanks, Howard.